900 snakes are loose in flooded China right now. Cobras, kraits, all of them set free the moment a breeding farm was torn apart by floodwater. A woman is already dead from a suspected bite, and in Hangzhou, rescue crews are now hunting snakes and people out of the same water at the same time. Let's set the scene, because the timeline here is genuinely terrifying. Holdings, Typhoon Maysak had already been dumping relentless rain across Guangxi for days, stalling directly over the region instead of moving through like a normal storm system, which meant the same ground kept absorbing wave after wave of tropical moisture with nowhere left to drain. On Monday morning, two of the region's reservoirs, Liulan and Yunbiao, breached their walls almost simultaneously, sending a wall of muddy water crashing into low-lying villages in Hangzhou. One of the places directly in that path was Dengwei Village in Yunbiao Township, home to several small-scale snake farms. These weren't backyard hobby operations. Snake farming is a real, established industry in this part of China. Snakes are bred here for traditional medicine, for meat, and for anti-venom production, an industry that has operated in townships like this one for generations. Local farms in the area primarily raise three types: king rat snakes, non-venomous water snakes, and venomous cobras. When the floodwater hit, it didn't just damage these farms. It obliterated their enclosures completely, and every snake inside, venomous or not, was suddenly free, swept into the same floodwater that was already trapping human families in their own homes. The village committee's own head, Wu Zhi, gave the preliminary estimate himself. Somewhere around 800 to 900 snakes had escaped once the farm was washed away. And here's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. This wasn't a controlled, contained release. It happened in the same instant that people were being trapped on rooftops and upper floors, unable to evacuate because the water had risen too fast for them to get out. So for a stretch of time, in certain pockets of Hangzhou, you had stranded families and loosed venomous snakes occupying the exact same floodwater, with nowhere for either of them to go. Neighbors described watching the animals surface near submerged doorways and fences, some clinging to floating debris just to stay above the waterline, drifting directly toward homes that already had people trapped inside them. It didn't stay hypothetical for long. At least one villager was confirmed bitten by a snake and rushed for emergency treatment. But it gets worse. According to state media reports, a woman in the area died after being bitten by a snake believed to possibly be a cobra, one of the reptiles suspected to have escaped from the flooded farms. Local residents told reporters that other people had been bitten too. And here's the part that makes this genuinely nightmarish. Some of those victims couldn't even get to a hospital in time, because they were still stranded by the floodwater itself when it happened. Trapped by rising water, bitten by a venomous snake, and unable to reach help because the same disaster that released the snake was also blocking the way out. A cobra bite left untreated can cause paralysis and death within hours, which means every minute of delay caused by blocked roads and stranded rescue boats was working directly against these victims. Online, the footage that's circulated out of Hangzhou looks like something out of a monster movie. Residents filmed serpents casually paddling down flooded streets, their heads raised just above the waterline, gliding past submerged cars and half-drowned houses like something out of a nature documentary gone wrong. One widely shared clip appears to show a many-banded krait, one of the most dangerous snakes in Asia, with a bite that can be fatal even with treatment, swimming through the same floodwater that residents were wading through to reach safety. Local officials later clarified that the majority of the escaped animals were common water snakes, non-venomous and relatively harmless, and that the true proportion of dangerous species like cobras was smaller. But when you're standing in chest-deep water in the dark, trying to get your family to higher ground, probably non-venomous is not exactly a reassuring statement, especially when telling a cobra apart from a harmless rat snake at a glance in murky brown floodwater in the middle of the night is nearly impossible even for someone with training. Authorities did not sit on this. The Hangzhou Emergency Management Bureau confirmed it was aware of the destroyed snake farm and the reported bites, and said frontline rescue workers had been notified and dispatched to the area. Health authorities in the wider region moved to stockpile anti-venom supplies at local hospitals and clinics, anticipating more bite cases, as floodwaters continued to spread the displaced snakes further from the original farm site. But given the scale of the broader flooding disaster, with entire towns underwater, dozens of reservoirs strained to their limits, and tens of thousands of people needing rescue at the same time, official capacity to hunt down hundreds of loose snakes across a flooded region was, understandably, stretched painfully thin. So the local community did something remarkable. More than a dozen residents from nearby villages that hadn't been hit by the flooding volunteered to form their own civilian snake-catching team. Armed with nothing more than fishing tools and electric fishing equipment, they went house to house through the disaster zone, hunting down escaped snakes before anyone else could be bitten. One member of that team, a man surnamed Zhu, later told state media that his group of 7 or 8 volunteers worked nonstop for 2 straight days and ended up capturing somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 snakes total, a number that actually exceeds the original estimate of how many had escaped, suggesting the true scale of loose snakes in the area may have been even worse than first reported. Zhu explained that after a flood, snakes instinctively seek out hidden, sheltered spots, corners of houses, gaps, and debris, anywhere dry and enclosed, and villagers would spot them and call the team in rather than attempt to handle a potentially venomous animal themselves. Officials have been blunt about the danger here. They've issued direct public warnings urging residents without professional snake handling experience not to try to catch or kill any snake they encounter, and instead to immediately report sightings to the village committee so trained personnel can respond. It's exactly the kind of warning nobody wants to need in the middle of an already catastrophic flood. But in Hangzhou this week, it became necessary. And here's the part of this story that somehow makes it even stranger. The snakes were not the only escapees. This same wave of flooding hit a privately owned zoo elsewhere in the Guangxi region. And when the enclosures there flooded, more than 100 animals got loose or went missing. Zebras, a humpback ox, miniature horses, donkeys, alpacas, porcupines, raccoons, ostriches and emus, dozens of tropical birds and peacocks. The zoo's owner later told local media that staff risked their own safety wading into rising water to physically lock down the enclosures, housing the more dangerous predator species before evacuating themselves. The zoo issued an emergency public notice warning nearby residents that some of the loose animals, particularly the ostriches, emus, and raccoons, could become aggressive if startled or cornered, and asked the public to report any sightings rather than approach the animals directly. For days afterward, rescue crews already stretched thin by human evacuations found themselves fielding reports of zebras wandering flooded roads and peacocks perched on rooftops alongside stranded residents waiting for boats. So take a step back and look at what was actually happening in this one corner of China over the span of just a few days. A typhoon stalling over the region and dumping close to a meter of rain in some spots. Multiple reservoirs failing almost simultaneously. Entire villages submerged with families trapped on rooftops. A death toll from the flooding itself that had already climbed into the dozens. And layered on top of all of that, hundreds of venomous and non-venomous snakes loose in the same floodwater as stranded residents, a woman dead from a suspected cobra bite, and a zoo's worth of exotic animals wandering a flood zone alongside emergency rescue crews who already had their hands completely full. This is what a compounding disaster actually looks like on the ground. Not just one crisis, but crisis stacking directly on top of crisis, each one making the others more dangerous. It's also worth understanding why this particular danger was even possible in the first place. Guangxi and neighboring provinces have some of the highest concentrations of licensed snake farms anywhere in the world, a byproduct of decades of demand for traditional medicine ingredients, snake meat, and antivenom. Serum. Most of these operations sit on modest plots of land, often in the same low-lying floodplain terrain that makes for cheap, workable ground, which also happens to be exactly the terrain most vulnerable to catastrophic flooding when a reservoir upstream gives way. Nobody designs a snake farm expecting a dam breach to hit it directly, and this week, that gap in planning turned into a very real, very public emergency. As of the latest updates, cleanup and snake-catching efforts are still ongoing in Hangzhou. Floodwaters are gradually receding in some of the worst-hit villages, and officials say the vast majority of the escaped animals, snake and otherwise, have either been recaptured, swept further downstream, or are still being tracked down by volunteers and professionals working the affected area. But with more rain still possible in the region, and a second typhoon having already pushed through eastern China this past weekend, nobody on the ground is treating this as fully over just yet. Health officials say they're continuing to monitor for snakebite cases at regional hospitals, and the civilian catching teams say they have no plans to stand down until officials confirm the area is genuinely clear. This story is a reminder of just how unpredictable these compounding catastrophes can get once multiple systems, infrastructure, wildlife, weather, start failing at the same time. One dam breach didn't just flood a town, it released a second entirely separate hazard directly into the middle of a rescue operation that was already overwhelmed. I'll keep tracking this story and bring you the update the moment there's more confirmed information. If you don't want to miss it, make sure you're subscribed, because there is a lot more still unfolding out of China right now.